Hi everyone, welcome to our video presentation of our action research study, Common Sentence Faults that English Composition 1 students face at the Western Multidisciplinary Campus of the University of El Salvador, Semester 2, 2019. First of all, we want to thank God for all the wisdom He has given us. Also, we want to thank our families for all the economical and emotional support that they have given us. And finally, we want to thank our teacher, Master Roxana de Triguer, for all the support that she has given us. This work is presented by Chanico Escalante, Juan Enrique, Chavez Sanchez, Stanis Waldo, García García, Luis Enrique, Mata Godínez, José Astur, Rodríguez Méndez, Elmer Ernesto, and me, Peraza Barrientos, Freddy Said. Chapter 1, Statement on the Problem. According to Nielsen, 1984, it is very important for students to know the elements of a complete sentence and the principles of coordination and punctuation. Because when students write sentences, they can commit a lot of mistakes when writing. They can commit mistakes such as comma splices, run-on sentence, overloaded sentences, fragments, and so on. So that's why this author states that it is very important, it is crucial for students to know all these to avoid those kinds of problems. So students must know the elements of a complete sentence and all the principles of coordination and punctuation. Based on some dialogues that the research team had with the teachers and the students in English Composition 1, students said that they still have some problems when they are required to write sentences. For example, they stated that they have problems with comma splices and run-on sentences because sometimes they don't know where to place a comma, where to place a period, where to place a semicolon. So they write run-on sentences and comma splices. Also, they stated that they have problems with fragments. Sometimes it's difficult to identify them for them, and also sometimes it is difficult to fix them. So they don't know how to deal with fragments. Also, they said that they have problems with overloaded sentences because when they write their sentences, they tend to write too much in their sentence. So they tend to put too much information in their sentences when they write. And this is a problem for them because they end up writing overloaded sentences. And also they said that they have problems with overloading, with parallelism, faulty parallelism. Because sometimes they do not join elements of the same grammatical structure in their sentence. So faulty parallelism is another problem that they said that they had. So based on this, the research team got some research questions to develop this study. They wrote 6 research questions. Number 1 says, how can English Composition 1 students' awareness on faulty sentences be enhanced at the Western Multidisciplinary Campus of the University of El Salvador, Semester 2, 2019. Number 2 says, how can English Composition 1 students' consciousness on punctuation mistakes be improved by the allowance of comments on their classmates' posts? Number 3 says, how is English Composition 1 students' self-correction on overloaded sentences enriched? Number 4 says, how can English Composition 1 students foster their active knowledge? Number 5 says, how can English Composition 1 students boost the avoidance of faulty parallelism difficulties? And number 6 says, how can English Composition 1 students' awareness on faulty sentences be tested? After getting the research questions, the research team also got some objectives, 1 general and 5 specific. The general one says to enhance English Composition 1 students' awareness on faulty sentence at the Western Multidisciplinary Campus of the University of El Salvador, Semester 2, 2019. Then they got 5 specific. Number 1 says to promote English Composition 1 students' consciousness on punctuation mistakes by the allowance of comments on their classmates' posts. Number 2 says to enrich English Composition 1 student self-correction on overloaded sentences through online platforms. Number 3 says to foster English Composition 1 students' active knowledge through mini presentations explaining how fragments occur and how to fix them. Number 4 says to boost English Composition 1 students' avoidance of faulty parallelism difficulties through the promotion of reading habits. And number 5 says to test if English Composition 1 students' awareness on faulty sentences is enhanced. After this, the research team also got the hypothesis. The hypothesis says, by enhancing English Composition 1 students' awareness on faulty sentences, they will avoid fragments, overloaded sentences, run-on sentences, faulty parallelism, and finally, it is important to mention the justification of this study. The research team believes that it is very important to develop this study because it will make students be aware of the problems that they are going to face when they write in Composition 1. So they are going to know these faulty sentences that they can commit. Also, it is very important, this study, because it will foster students' active knowledge to deal with these problems. And also, it is going to boost English Composition 1 students to help them to correct these kind of mistakes by themselves. And finally, this study is very important because it will provide recommendations for students and teachers that are involved in English Composition 1.
Chapter 2, Referential Framework. In this chapter, we mentioned that English Composition 1 students present some problems at the moment they are learning. Those problems are in faulty sentence, problems with punctuation mistake such as run-on sentence, comma splice, sentence fragment, and lack of parallelism. English Composition 1 student requires that put into practice all the knowledge that they have and write all sentences in a good way, in a perfect way, using all things that they know. Elements of the sentence. We define that a sentence, according to Harry, 2003, a sentence is a group of words that has at least one independent clause and it expresses a complete thought. It can have one or more independent clauses. A clause. We define that there are 2 types of clauses, an independent clause and a dependent clause. A dependent clause cannot stand by itself, but an independent clause has a clear message. There are 3 types of clauses: adjective clause, noun clause, and adverb clause. Faulty sentence. We define that the faulty sentence is a deficient sentence. It sometimes sounds wrong or incomplete. It is another particular characteristic is that it is difficult to understand. We need to use grammatical correct the sentence. Adrian Iliapos in 2017 stated that knowledge is a power, but this power cannot be obtained without the knowledge. There are some things that there are emerged when the teacher use their knowledge and they express their knowledge to the students. There are some things that the student need to considerate when they are learning. Self-correction. According to TED in English, is when learners correct them instead of a teacher doing it. A student can correct the sentence, they can identify the problem, and they have the capacity and they will develop the capacity to correct and to fix all sentences that they write. Punctuation or punctuation mark. It is a complex system of symbols that express different things, but readers have to take in consideration this important part of the sentence. Punctuation mark are period, comma, semicolon, interrogation mark, exclamation mark, and so on. When writers don't use the correct punctuation, they may write a comma splice or a run-on sentence. Comma splice. According to Liz Barton, a comma splice occurs when the writer uses a comma, a normal comma, by itself to connect two independent clauses. A student needs to face this problem and they have to use the comma in a correct way. A comma can separate two independent clauses and as a period. The comma splice is a punctuation error that occurs either when two independent clauses are joined only by a comma and not use a coordinating conjunction, or when a comma is used instead of a semicolon between two independent clauses. Harris, 2013.
Now, I am going to talk about chapter number 3, which is methodological design. In this part, I'm going to explain all the procedures that researchers took into consideration in order to carry out the study. To start with, I am going to talk about the paradigm, which is a qualitative paradigm in order to gather information through a semi-structured observation, a checklist, and a production task. Also, researchers took into account and carried out an action research study expecting a change in composition 1 student. Now, this phenomenon took place in the University of El Salvador Western Multidisciplinary Campus in Santa Ana in composition 1 students. The units of observation of this study are or is students' awareness on faulty sentences such as faulty parallelism, comma splices, run-on sentences, overloaded sentences, and fragments. The sampling procedure that the research team carried out in order to get the population to work with was the purposive sampling. Why? Because the researchers took into consideration the 4 groups that made up the whole population of composition 1 students, but they took into consideration the schedule of students, and they got to know that the best group to work with was group 1. Now, the data collection instruments that researchers used to gather information were 3 different checklists, a semi-structured observation, and a production task. When researchers approached the field of study, they talked to the teacher first of the composition group, which was composition group 1, and they talked to students and they explained how all the process would be. they also created a Facebook group in order to have all the students gather in the same place, in the same group, where they would upload practices, information, videos, and all related to the study. In order to analyze the information and to process the information, researchers used Word from Microsoft Office. They also used Excel in order to tabulate all the information, all the quantitative information they gathered.
Validation and reliability. The researchers created some instruments based on validation criteria. The first one is face validity, which was about knowing if the instruments measure what they intend to measure. The second one is content validity, which was about asking an expert on the field to check the instruments to know if they were correct or not. Since the researchers know that this was a serious research study, they took into consideration some ethical aspects. For example, respect. The researchers committed themselves to respect the participants' views, opinions, and results they got from them. Objectivity. The researchers agreed not to let any personal interest interfere in the process of investigating. Honesty. The researchers made sure that they presented the information as they found it. And the last one, anonymity. The researchers made sure not to let any information leak. Now, the researchers also created a plan of action. This plan of action was divided into 3 main parts. But before developing those parts, the researchers had a conversation with students so that they knew what the main problems that students were having were. The first stage was about meeting students and letting them know all the activities they had to do. For example, the researchers told students to join a Facebook group because there they did many activities. And also the researchers let students know that they were going to join, they were going to meet so that they can solve some problems during the process. The second stage was about punctuation mistakes. In here, the researchers told the students to upload 15 sentences using punctuation correctly. Also, the students had to make some comments on their peers' posts, and also the researchers told the students that they could meet if they had some doubts. Then the researchers developed the process of vocabulary sentences. In here, the researchers uploaded some information to the Facebook group so that students had a clear idea of what vocabulary sentences were. Also, the students had to do a quiz on the model, and the researchers did this so that they could see if students had a clear idea of the topic. The third and last stage was about fragments. In here, the researchers also uploaded a video regarding fragments and how they were fit and how they were identified. In here, the students had to make some mini presentations regarding this topic, and also the researchers provided feedback to them after students finished developing the presentations. And the last activity was about faulty parallelism. In here, the researchers uploaded some pieces of writing to the Facebook group with 40 parallelism mistakes, and students have to correct and spot all the mistakes. Also, students have to help their peers to if they have some doubts. And that was all about the plan of action. The researchers also created a matrix that was useful to operationalize the dimensions. This matrix was divided into some criteria. For example, the first contained a variable, dimensions, a definition per each dimension, some indicators regarding these dimensions, some instruments, and the time. The first and only variable was awareness on faulty sentences, and the first dimension was awareness, which is the perception of a fact or situation. The second dimension was punctuation mistakes, which is when a person doesn't use commas proper, periods or commas properly, and also when a person omits to place commas or periods when they are needed. And there were some indicators regarding this dimension. For example, use a period, use a comma, conjunctions after a comma, use of subordinating conjunctions, and there were two instruments, a checklist, 3 hours per week, and a production test, 50 minutes. The next dimension was overloaded sentences, which are constructions that bore the readers by forcing too many ideas into only one sentence. And there were some indicators regarding this dimension. For example, too many ideas into one sentence, the information bores the reader, and so forth. And there were two instruments as well, a checklist, 3 hours per week, and a production test, 50 minutes. The next dimension was about fragments, which are constructions that are just phrases or dependent clauses. And there were some indicators as well. For example, the students had confidence while presenting, the students understand the different types of fragments, and the students know the construction of a sentence. And there were two instruments, a semi-structured observation, 2 hours, and a production test, 50 minutes. The last dimension was about faulty parallelism, which are constructions that have two or more sentences of parts of a sentence that are not equivalent. And to mention some indicators, all grammatical structures, for example, all nouns, all verbs, all phrases. It was easier for students to avoid committing faulty parallelism, and also there were two instruments, a checklist, 3 hours per week, and a production test, 50 minutes.
Chapter 4, Analysis and Interpretation of Data. In this chapter, researchers ordered and interpreted all information gotten from two tools, a semi-structured observation and a checklist. Regarding consciousness and punctuation mistakes, students did not have any difficulties, since the majority of them knew how to use a conjunction after a comma, or to separate two independent clauses by using a comma, or in other cases, they separated too many ideas by writing a comma. Regarding run-on sentences, the information gotten showed that most of the students opted for the common and easiest ways. For example, they used a period, a semicolon, or a subordinating conjunction. This showed how aware students were, since they did not have any difficulties for doing it so. Regarding overloaded sentences, The information gotten showed that students' self-correction on overloaded sentences could be enriched through online platforms. According to graph B1, overloaded sentences, 8 out of 10 students knew how to correct this type of error, since they wrote the subject close to the start of the sentence. They also knew how to write clear main verbs, since they wanted to avoid overloaded sentences. Regarding ideas, overloaded sentence, or misunderstanding sentences, most of the students used to do it. Also, Composition 1 students hardly ever commented on someone else's post. What's more, most of them knew how to join ideas and how to use conjunctions properly. Finally, they sometimes bored readers because they wrote too much information. In regard to fragments, researchers presented a table in which they got information from a student's presentation on how fragments occur and how to fix them. It was observed that most of the students managed the information very well. They understood the different types of fragments. They also did not hesitate when expressing themselves. They became active participants. They felt comfortable when expressing their ideas. They were able to help others. They were aware of sentence construction. Respecting faulty parallelism, the results gotten showed that most of the students often used the same grammatical structures when writing sentences. It was seen also that the majority of them connected ideas properly. What's more, the majority of students hardly ever pointed out this type of mistakes. With regard to grasping the meaning of sentences, half of students did it. With reference to language development, not all students could get into the nature of language to comprehend its structure. Lastly, most of the students knew how to avoid faulty parallelism because they recognized this type of error.
Chapter 5. Conclusions and Recommendations. Finally, the research team, after applying all the tools and identifying the problems and having developed some activities, they found out that students' awareness on faulty parallelism can be enhanced through different activities, such as mini presentation, online platforms, and commenting on their classmate posts. They can enhance and foster their active knowledge. For example, the research team carried out an activity through Facebook. Through this online platform, they had to create some sentences. They did it, and after this activity, they had a class, and then they were forced or they were asked to comment or make any comment about others' classmate posts. The research team found out that it was easier for them to correct other classmate posts because it was easier to find out that there was a problem, but not in their sentences, because when we or people tend to analyze others' posts, other style of writing, they can easily spot out some mistakes or not well structured sentences. Also, they discover that when students make the information of their own or make it their own, they can easily explain a topic and understand it better. For example, they read information about sentence fragments and then they had a mini presentation, but they were asked to do it with real life situation examples. They were asked to do it with the life of the university, life at their home, public transportation, the common activities they faced every day. And it was seen that it was easier for them when asked to demonstrate that, because they could easily spot some problems and some mistakes with fragments with the real-life situation examples the researchers provided. Also, when it comes to recommendations, the research team recommends students to continue practicing and being engaged through online platforms as they did during the process. Also, for doing so and getting more information and getting acquainted with the topics about faulty sentences, they recommend students to visit Cambridge University Press composition section. In there, they are going to find many resources for them to continue practicing faulty parallelism, random sentences, fragments, and so on, overloaded sentences. They can find resources about it, have comment with other and interact with different people. Also, they recommend Prentice Hall composition books in which they can find different resources. Also, they can sign up for free in their platform in internet, and they can, by doing so, they can improve their knowledge, and they can improve also their writing. Also, they recommend students to create debates with their classmates outside the classroom. They can do it with their classmates by creating some different groups outside the classroom in their free time if they have, or they can do it at any time they could. With this, they can discuss by first reading the online platform the online resources that we recommend, like Prentice Hall and Cambridge University Press composition resources. Then they can create group discussions in which they can join at the university or any other place they have, and create discussions and comments and make comments about the information they have in the sentences. They also can write and ask for advice to any of other classmates, and by doing so they can enhance and foster their active knowledge and learn at the same time. And basically that was all for us. Thank you very much for your attention, and for your time to our work. That was all for us. Thank you very much.